My name is Sarah, I'm 28 years old. I need to tell someone what happened, and I don't know where else to do it. Not to my therapist, not to my best friend, not even in my diary. Reddit feels like the right place because I can be honest without seeing their faces change when they judge me. Or maybe they won't judge me. I don't know anymore. But I'm tired of carrying this alone, and I think people need to understand that sometimes the people closest to you will deliberately hurt you in ways that take years to understand. This started, I think, about 4 years ago, though I didn't know it was starting. That's how these things work. They don't arrive announced. They creep in quietly, making you question yourself so slowly that by the time you realize what's happening, you've already been rebuilt in someone else's image. My parents have always been important to me. I know that's not revolutionary. Most people have complicated relationships with their parents, but mine felt different, or at least I thought they did. My dad is a successful doctor, respected in his field. My mom is a therapist, which is ironic now that I think about it. They presented themselves as progressive, understanding people who valued honesty and emotional intelligence. They were the kind of parents other people envied. At least that's what people told me. I grew up being their daughter. That sounds obvious, but what I mean is that I was built for public consumption. I was the smart one, good grades, good college, good job. I was polished, obedient in ways that looked like independence. I made them look good, and for a long time I thought this was love. My senior year of college, I started dating someone. His name was Michael, and he wasn't what my parents would have chosen for me. He was a musician, not particularly ambitious by their standards, and he came from a working-class background. My mom made jokes about it, nothing mean on the surface, but they landed sharp. "Oh, the struggling artist phase," she'd say when I mentioned his band was getting gigs. My dad was quieter about his disapproval, which somehow felt worse. But I loved him, not the destructive, all-consuming love you see in movies, just the real kind, the kind where someone gets you, where you can be quiet together without it feeling like a failure. We were together for 5 years. We moved in together after college. We talked about getting married, not as something we needed to do immediately, but as something we wanted eventually. We were building something small and real and honest, or so I thought. The humiliation happened on what started as an ordinary Saturday. My parents were hosting their annual dinner party. It was one of those carefully curated events they threw every summer, the kinds of things where my mom spent 3 days prepping and my dad wore the right watch. I'd been going to these since I was young, and they'd become less about family and more about them showing off their life, their home, their successful daughter. I brought Michael. This was maybe the 4th time he'd attended one of these dinners, and he always seemed uncomfortable, but he went for me. I remember appreciating that about him. He did things for me even when they cost him something. We were in the living room, and I was talking to one of my mom's colleagues about my job in marketing. It was a boring conversation, the kind where you talk about work without saying anything real. Michael was nearby, talking to my dad about something I couldn't hear. I wasn't paying close attention. I never did at these things. I was too busy performing the role of the successful daughter who had her life together. My mom called everyone to the dining room. We all moved like we were choreographed, finding our seats around the expensive table. The food was beautiful, the way it always was. My mom is an excellent cook when she bothers to be. She made an effort for these dinners in ways she never did for regular family meals. I'd noticed this years ago, but never let myself think about what it meant. We were maybe 20 minutes in when my dad made a toast. He did this at every dinner, something about friendship and gratitude and his family. But this time his eyes were on me and Michael, and his smile had an edge I'd never seen before. "I want to talk about choices," he said, his glass raised, "and how we all make them, sometimes with more wisdom than others." My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. I'd heard it before in his voice when he was about to say something cruel disguised as honesty. He continued, "Sarah has always been someone we're proud of, brilliant, hardworking, destined for great things, and yet," he paused, letting the silence stretch, "and yet she chooses to spend her life with someone who doesn't have the ambition or drive to match her potential. It's fascinating, really, how love can make intelligent people do unintelligent things." The room went quiet. I felt Michael's hand find mine under the table, squeezing once, a gesture that felt like an apology, though he'd done nothing wrong. My mom laughed, a light, pleasant sound that was somehow worse than my dad's words. "Oh, honey," she said, looking at my dad with this expression of mock concern. "You're being too generous. It's not just about ambition. Michael is a nice boy, truly. But let's be honest, Sarah is marrying down. significantly down. Her father and I just wonder what she sees in him we've never quite understood. Maybe he makes her feel less threatened, my dad added. Less intimidated. Some women need that, I suppose. I sat there, I couldn't move, I couldn't speak. Michael's hand squeezed mine again, but tighter this time. I could feel his shame, his embarrassment, even though he'd done nothing to deserve it. And I said nothing. I did nothing. I smiled like it was a joke, like my parents were just being their playfully critical selves. I performed normalcy while they dismantled my relationship in front of 12 of their friends. The evening continued. Eventually, the conversation moved to other topics. Someone talked about a vacation. Someone else complained about their kids' school. The dinner party carried on as though my dad hadn't just announced to a room full of people that my boyfriend wasn't good enough for me, as though my mom hadn't laughed about it. We left early. Michael and I didn't speak much on the drive home. He kept his eyes on the road and I kept my eyes on the window. When we got home, he went to bed. I stayed up, sitting on the kitchen counter in the dark, trying to understand how people you trust could hurt you so deliberately. But here's the thing about betrayal from family. It's confusing in a way that betrayal from strangers isn't, because they're family, because you have decades of positive memories that suddenly become suspect. Did they always think these things? Were there moments of genuine love? Or was it all just an investment in having a successful daughter who made them look good? I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not really. When Michael asked if I was okay, I told him yes. When my best friend noticed I was quiet, I said I was just tired. I internalized it in that way that women are trained to do, like it was somehow my fault for bringing Michael to an event where my parents could humiliate him, like I should have known better. Things shifted after that night. Subtly at first, I started finding myself more critical of Michael in ways that felt like they weren't coming from me. When he came home excited about a new gig, I heard my dad's voice in my head asking about his long-term prospects. When he struggled with money, which he did, being a musician isn't lucrative, I felt a strange shame that had nothing to do with my actual feelings. My parents, meanwhile, continued like nothing had happened. My mom sent me a recipe for something I'd complimented at the dinner. My dad texted me a news article about a study he thought I'd find interesting. They were acting like people who had said nothing wrong, who had done nothing wrong. And I let them. That was the thing I hated myself for then and now. I let them. I didn't defend Michael that night. I didn't call my parents out. I just absorbed their words like they were truth and started building a wall between myself and the person I loved. 6 months after that dinner, Michael and I broke up. It was the kind of breakup that looks mutual from the outside, where you both list reasons and agree that things have changed. But the truth was simpler and more painful. I had let my parents' voice override my own judgment. I had started believing that I was settling, that I should want more, that Michael was holding me back. It took me about a year to realize what had actually happened. I was in therapy, a different therapist from my mom, obviously, and she asked me something simple. What do you think your parents wanted from that dinner party? I remember thinking about it for a long time, and then it hit me. They wanted control. They had built a version of me that was successful and polished and reflected well on them, and when I threatened that version by choosing someone they deemed unsuitable, they dismantled it publicly. They humiliated my boyfriend to send me a message. I belonged to them. My choices needed to be ones they approved of. My life was an extension of their life. And it worked. I broke up with him. I went back to dating men my parents would approve of, ambitious, successful from good families. I became even more focused on my career, climbing the ladder faster and faster, always aware that I was doing it partly for them. I was living the life they wanted me to live, and I didn't even fully realize it until I was 2 years into a relationship with a man I didn't actually love. That's when something shifted in me. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It was sitting in my apartment one Tuesday night, listening to my boyfriend. His name was David, very successful, very respectable, talk about a promotion he'd gotten and realizing that I felt nothing. Not happiness for him, not excitement about our future, nothing, just a hollow sense of going through motions that weren't mine. And I thought about Michael, about what I'd thrown away because I was afraid of my parents' judgment, about the person I'd let them turn me into. I started researching quietly. I looked at my parents' lives differently. I paid attention to conversations in a way I hadn't before. I started noticing patterns. How my mom isolated my dad's friends if she decided they weren't good enough. How my dad positioned himself as the authority figure in every conversation, always right, always dismissive of anyone he decided was beneath him. How they had done the same thing to me that they did to everyone else, created a version of you that served their needs, and if you didn't fit that version, they dismantled you. I broke up with David. My parents were disappointed, of course. My mom suggested I might benefit from exploring why I was so resistant to happiness. My dad asked if there was something wrong with me. The implication was always the same. I was broken for not wanting what they wanted for me. And that's when I decided to do something about it. I want to be clear about what something means. I'm not going to hurt anyone. I never did anything illegal or violent or genuinely cruel. But I did decide that my parents were going to experience, just for once, what it felt like to lose control. To be undermined publicly the way they had undermined me. To feel a fraction of the shame they had caused. I started with information. I reached out to Michael. I know how that sounds, like I was using him for revenge, but that's not what happened. We met for coffee and I told him the truth about that dinner party. I told him that my parents had deliberately sabotaged our relationship. I told him that I had let them, and I told him that I was sorry that I had spent 2 years regretting letting him go. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I didn't expect. I knew, Sarah, I always knew that's what was happening, I just didn't know how to stop it. We didn't get back together. That's not the ending people want to hear, but it's the real one. We got coffee occasionally. He started dating someone new, someone his family actually approved of, ironically, but something shifted between us that day. Some of the guilt I carried dissolved because he helped me see that it wasn't my fault, not really. I had been manipulated by people I trusted. But more importantly, he gave me something else. Names, information. He told me about a woman named Jessica who had dated his best friend, and how my parents had done the same thing to her. How they had publicly criticized her at another dinner party, and she had tried to kill herself 3 months later. How she was okay now, but she'd spent years in recovery. And that's when something in me broke open in a different way. I'm not going to detail exactly what I did. Not because I'm ashamed, but because some of it could be identifying, and I still have family I want to protect. But I will say that I started documenting things. I paid attention to how my parents treated people at their events. I listened to how they talked about people behind their backs. I started keeping careful records of times they had been cruel, manipulative, or dishonest. I wasn't fabricating anything. I was just being honest about what I witnessed. And then I shared it. Not publicly at first. I contacted people my parents had hurt. Jessica, Michael's friend, a woman my mom had fired from her practice under ethically questionable circumstances. I wasn't telling them to do anything. I was just telling them the truth and asking them if my parents had also hurt them in ways they'd never spoken about. They had, over and over again. My parents' social circle started changing, not immediately, but over the course of a few months, people stopped coming to their dinner parties. The colleagues who had once seemed important to them started finding reasons not to accept invitations. My dad's medical practice started getting reviews online from people who felt he was condescending. My mom's therapy clients, the ones who started comparing notes, started to realize that her advice to them often centered on controlling the people around them rather than healing. They lost respect, not through anything dramatic, but through the slow accumulation of people realizing who they actually were. My parents called me in a panic. They wanted to know what I had done. My dad's voice was shaking in a way I'd never heard it before. My mom was angry, which was a different kind of frightening than her calculated cruelty. "You've destroyed us," my mom said. "Your own parents, how could you?" And I said something I'd been waiting years to say. "I didn't destroy you. I just told people the truth. If that's destroying you, maybe you should think about who you've been." I hung up. I didn't have a dramatic confrontation scene where I told them about the dinner party or about Jessica or about all the ways they'd hurt me. I didn't need to. The consequences were just beginning, and they would unfold naturally as more people realized what my parents were actually like. Here's where the twist comes in, and it's the part that still makes me uncomfortable. A month after everything started falling apart for my parents, my mom had a breakdown, not metaphorical. She actually broke down, went to the hospital, spent a week in psychiatric care. My dad called me, and his voice was so small that I almost didn't recognize it. "Your mother is asking for you," he said. "I know you're angry, I know we've hurt you, but she's in a very bad place." I went to the hospital, and when I saw my mom, This woman who had spent decades controlling everyone around her, sitting in a hospital bed looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, something unexpected happened. I felt empathy. Not forgiveness, not even kindness exactly, but a recognition that my mom wasn't actually the villain in some story where I was the heroine. She was just a scared woman who had coped with her own insecurity by trying to control the world around her. She had passed that fear on to me. She had hurt me, but she was also suffering now, genuinely suffering, and I could see that the thing I'd done, exposing her, letting her world crumble, had worked exactly as I'd planned. And it didn't feel as good as I thought it would. I visited her in the hospital, and we didn't talk about the dinner party. We didn't talk about revenge or betrayal or any of the big things. I just sat there while she cried about how alone she felt, how she didn't recognize her life anymore. And I listened, not because I forgave her, but because I was beginning to understand something about myself. I had let my parents' cruelty turn me into someone like them. I had become someone who hurt people to regain power, and that realization was more painful than anything they'd ever done to me, because it meant I had to take responsibility for my own choices. My parents and I don't have a perfect relationship now. We're not close the way we used to pretend to be, but we're honest in a way we never were before. My mom went to intensive therapy, real therapy, not the kind she practiced on others. My dad admitted in one of our conversations that he had always been insecure about his own accomplishments and had compensated by diminishing everyone around him. These admissions don't erase what happened. They don't make the humiliation okay or give me back the years I spent with the wrong person or undo the damage they did to Jessica and others. But they mean something. They mean that the consequences of their actions finally reached them in a way that created the possibility of change. As for me, I'm still working through what it means to have been hurt by my parents and to have hurt them in return. I'm still learning how to make choices that are actually mine, not reactions to their control. I'm in therapy working through the impact of growing up with parents who loved the idea of me more than they loved me. And Michael, we're not back together, but we're friends. Real friends. We talk about what happened with clarity, and sometimes I think about the parallel universe where I had just been strong enough that night to defend him, to defend myself. But I don't live in that universe. I live in this one, where I made mistakes and learned from them, and started the long process of becoming someone who makes choices based on what's actually true rather than what I've been conditioned to believe. The thing I want people to know is that revenge, even quiet revenge, even justified revenge, doesn't fix anything. It just creates different problems. The real work, the actually hard work, is in understanding why the people you love hurt you, why you let them, and what you need to do to make sure you don't become them. I'm still working on that. I'll probably always be working on it, but at least now I'm doing it for myself.